Hey, today we're going to be tackling the subject of best arcade ports to the Amiga. It's not gonna be strictly my most favorite games ported to the system, as some of these you're about to see are actually games I do not play or even like, but games that are most faithfully converted. And if they're fun, then that's just additional points in my books to sorta tip the scale in their favor. But before we get into that, please hit those like and subscribe buttons below. It helps me more than you know. Thanks. First of all, I'd like to quickly skim through these 5 honorable mentions. They're the games that for whatever the reason didn't get into top 10, but are worth showing off despite that. I was never a fan of games like Operation Wolf or Cabal here, but despite that I can understand and appreciate their impact on the industry and also a decent port from the arcades. I considered both, but Cabal's fast and hectic action-based gameplay just won over Operation Wolf for me this time. It's an action-packed title that at times feels overwhelming, but if you give it enough time and get used to the controls, can be quite enjoyable. A true classic and a game that sports an amazing tune in the background. It's one of those titles that's very easy to get into and to understand what it's all about, but difficult to beat and master. Controls, in my opinion, leave a little bit to be desired, but other than that, it's a perfectly good arcade port that's as good as it was originally, only lacking polish that the latter games on the Amiga had. Still, one of the, if not the best port on home systems. While I love the New Zealand story, I absolutely suck at it. I did in the arcades, and I do at home on the Amiga. I suppose it's because Tato's formula of making games that suck every last coin out of your pocket in the arcades was translated to the home system along with this conversion. The enemies respawn unpredictably, the game is very frantic and it's just plain difficult right from the start. Despite my earlier observations, it's a great port nonetheless. Toki is an arcade title at heart, difficult to the point of being annoying. And this Amiga port doesn't change that. I suppose, as conversions go, it kinda means that it's a good one. The graphics and music are really good and all arcades content is included, to the point of porting things that were not so great in original, like oddly small and cramped play area. One way or another, whatever I wanna say or feel about Toki, the port of it to Amiga is near perfect. R-Type 2 is an arcade classic. It was extremely difficult in the arcades and it's even more so on the Amiga. Graphics and sounds are excellent and seem to be very close to the original, other than missing some of the colors. Interestingly enough, unlike R-Type 1, R-Type 2 on the Amiga suffers from constant slowdowns. Perhaps it's the change of the developer that's the issue here, but surprisingly enough these slowdowns actually make the game easier. Marble Madness was released in 1986 on the Amiga. Yes, a whole year before the famous classic A500 was even on the market. And it was an pixel perfect port that ran at full speed of the system, meaning 60 FPS on US systems and 50 FPS in Europe, which was twice as smooth than original did. I was never a big fan of the game, neither in the arcades nor at home, but it is as close port as they come, so deserves the justice of being on this list. Moving the trackball controls to joystick perhaps was not the best choice, but given the quality of the most popular early Amiga mice, it may have been the only feasible one. It's a decent game if you like to play with your balls, pun intended. I don't care too much about it, but it's definitely a solid 10th spot. Super Hang-On is another of those early Amiga titles, but it seems that there's gonna be quite a few of these on this list, so get used to it. It may not be nowhere near as good as Sega's Genesis port was, but it was definitely the best one out of all 8 and 16-bit computer conversions of the yesteryear. It ran fast and frantic so you could really feel the wind in your hair, or I left the window open while playing for this video, one or the other. Still, as racing games go on the Amiga, Super Hang-On, while not being the best per se, was exceptional and a definite top 10 in the genre. Coincidentally, it seems one of the best ports from arcades to the system too. It was what Outrun games on the Amiga should have been, but instead failed miserably. Golden Axe on the Amiga is the best of the game's ports in existence, apart from the near arcade perfect Sega Mega Drive/Genesis one. But these were the ports of Sega's games on Sega's 16-bit machine, so even if they wanted to, I doubt they could botch it. Come to think of it, I believe the PC version was very good too, but there was something done there to the story to extend it that it's more of a remake than straight conversion, I think. Anyway, Amiga's outing has all the characters, enemies and levels and plays identically to the arcade. Tad less smooth perhaps with an enemy or two less on the screen, but other than that, it's the same game that can still be enjoyed in couch co-op. Great title to waste an evening with a friend. Pac-Mania is a conversion I didn't know about before approaching the subject of this video. I was actually looking for a Miss Pac-Man port, but it seems that the one I remember was on C64 and Amiga never got one. Go figure. Anyway, since I found it anyway, I decided to give it a go to compare it to the arcade, and oh my days was it a blast. I mean, it may be not as colorful as original, but it plays as good if not better. The screen area is a bit bigger, showing quite a lot of more of it, which makes the game a little easier to strategize. But runs a bit faster, so it balances the difficulty nicely. Overall, it may not be as good as original Pac-Man or even Miss Pac-Man were, but it's an excellent port from the arcades and a great fun to be had if you like these kinds of games. In the very first years of home gaming, not many titles could compete with popularity of Pong, and then a bit later Tetris. Two arcade titles most definitely could: Pac-Man and Arkanoid. Arkanoid seemed to be ported to everything under the sun in the late 80s, and grand majority of those conversions were very good. Amiga's outing is no different. It sports arcade's introduction, all stages, music and sounds, and looks virtually identical. In my opinion, perhaps even a tiny bit better. Porting the controls from arcade struggle to Amiga's mouse rather than joystick was also a good move, as those fast, analog controls allowed for split-second decisions to be performed and near-death saves actually possible. Silkworm released in 1989, a year after the arcade original. It's not long, but clearly long enough it seems to convert the game amazingly to seemingly weaker home system. The game on the Amiga sounds just amazing. Heavy, meaty explosions are much better and more realistic than in many other, newer shooters on the system, and the gameplay is top-notch. It may not be as nice looking as colorful as the original, but runs at higher than arcade resolution while using a bit smaller sprites, allowing player to see more on the screen at once, which may have made the game a bit easier but also much more fun to play. Some would probably say that this and R-Type games should swap spots, but I disagree. And while the both R-Type titles are great, they're just too difficult to be enjoyed as much as the Silkworm can be. Toasty! Test your might. And that you just bloody well might in either of these games. While when released first, Mortal Kombat was considered a marvel, a game that shouldn't have been possible on the lowly A500, the second, at least in terms of presentation, not only exceeded but crushed shock factor the first one induced. All stages, all characters and even all the moves were present in either. Translation of multiple button controls from arcades to one fire button on the Amiga was no doubt a challenge, often requiring from a player some real advanced hand gymnastics. Wink wink nudge nudge, eh? The gameplay, especially in two-player versus mode, was exceptional, despite even the infamous Amiga disc juggling. Many friendships were shaken, some were broken, just because of this game. It was a great time to be a gamer and a great time to have an Amiga. When I first saw Pong on the Amiga at my friend's house, before I even had my A500, I felt a sudden, spiky and uncontrollable pain around my temple, and it grew, and in a matter of seconds it was beyond control, and then boom, it popped, and my mind was blown. Pong was not an arcade-like game, it was the arcade game. Seeing it in his house, I honestly couldn't tell any difference from the arcades, without direct comparison, apart from the fact that I didn't have to keep dropping coins in the machine. The conversion is beyond perfect. Everything is included, from all stages and pickups through two-player on-screen co-op to addictive one-more-try gameplay. The premise is simple and easy to pick up, but soon the levels get more and more challenging, and the game itself ends up being difficult to master. A perfect arcade title. With Bobble, I have to note that you won't hear a single beep, bop or music throughout its gameplay, even though it's the music that's the most memorable in game's presentation. Classic tune that just drills into your brain and stays there forever, surfacing up in the worst possible moments. It comes back to me from time to time in real life for no reason, and I find myself whistling it away like a lunatic. Anyway, the video's silent cause whenever I tried to upload the game to YouTube, every single time I was flagged for copyright by some individual remixer of music from it. So yeah, to summarize this second spot, it's an amazing title both originally and in this arcade perfect port. All levels, enemies, two-player co-op and incredible gameplay are here, brilliantly converted to the Amiga. It's an old and simple game, but it's also an extremely addictive one. Rodland was already featured in one of my other earlier top 10s and it got the third spot there. So grabbing first one here speaks to the uncanny quality of this title. Don't get fooled by the incredibly and amazingly idiotic story it has as its background, as games in the arcades were most definitely not known for the detailed and lore-deep stories they told. Rodland is a masterpiece, both the original and this excellent port to the Amiga. It features beautiful colorful graphics, big and smoothly animated sprites and a memorable tune that, unlike the previous title on this list, will also stay with you long after playing. On top of that, the brilliant two-player mode was also ported to the Commodore system, and while it may seem that it's a great way to play it in co-op and defeat the stage after stage together, it was also a fun way to mess around with friends by dropping monsters on top of their heads. All in all, it's not also one of the best arcade ports to the Amiga, but most importantly one of the best games released on the system in all of its lifespan. If you've never played it, it's high time to grab a friend, a beer or whatever you drink these days and have some good old arcade fun in this gem of a game. Thanks a bunch for watching. I'm sure that I've missed some of your favorites. After all, it's impossible to make a list that will suit everyone. If you wanted to see a particular title here, feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you're in an especially generous mood, however, you may even consider joining my Patreon or a small donation. It would help me make more better content, replace some of the aging editing gear, and maybe even get a camera. Details are in the description below. For me, however, this is all, so have a good one, and I'll see you next time.
You